PFAOs and PFOs or whatever, there's different acronyms, are used because they have certain properties. That's why we use them. If we didn't have the desired properties, we wouldn't use them.
Yeah.
PFAs or PFAOs or whatever, for polymer organics, is by inventing new molecules that have those properties but don't have the perfluoro groups.
Hello, I'm Danny from KEN-Tech, and this is Dr. Dean Toste. He's the chairman of the Department of Chemistry at UC Berkeley. Nice to meet you, Mr. Toste.
Nice to meet you.
So here are a couple ice-breaking questions. First, could you briefly describe your background and research areas?
Sure. I was born in Portugal.
Okay.
Yeah. But I grew up in Canada, and I went to the University of Toronto as an undergraduate.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved to Stanford to do my PhD in organic chemistry. And then I was a postdoc at Caltech, also in California, where I worked with Bob Grubbs, who won the Nobel Prize a few years after I was there. And then I moved to Berkeley in 2002, probably before you were born.
I mean, a little bit.
Yeah,
but
around the time you were born.
Yeah, close.
To take my current position as a professor, and there I started a research group that's based on my background, was largely focused on organic chemistry. Mm-hmm. And over the years, my group and I have made contributions in organic chemistry, but we've also expanded into areas that are related to energy and also related to biology. So we generally use the tools of organic and physical organic chemistry to solve problems of interest to humankind, like medicine and energy.
So you went to all these great, famous, popular schools in the States. Wow, that's really impressive. So what sparked your interest in the current field?
I mean, like I said, my group does like physical organic chemistry, right? So we try to understand the way molecules react and behave. As it relates to what we're talking about here at KEN-Tech today, we were interested in how organic molecules behave in the context of storing energy for batteries.
Oh, okay.
So the interest was sparked as an outgrowth of just like my fundamental interest in the way organic molecules behave. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But of course, pushed forward by society's need to solve the climate change problem and ways to store renewable energy so we could use it whenever we want.
So the next couple questions are related to your research. And as an expert in organic chemistry, could you explain what organic chemistry is so that a normal person could understand?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So, I mean, by definition, organic chemistry is the chemistry of molecules that are based on carbon, right, rather than on all the other elements in the periodic table. Mm-hmm. Organic chemistry tends to focus on carbon, molecules containing carbon bonds, carbon, hydrogen. Yeah. And these tend to be the molecules of life. Like we're all made of organic, all life is made of organic molecules, mostly. And so organic chemistry has largely focused on that, right? Studying how to make those molecules, how those molecules behave, whether that is in the context of how they might behave in, DNA replication, to like how they might be used to make a medicine. So it's basically the study of the properties and the synthesis of carbon-based molecules.
I think that's easy enough for the common person to understand, right? I understand that some of the new researches that are being done right now involve catalyst reactions for organic synthesis. So could you again explain what catalysts are to the common audience?
I was thinking about a catalyst as I was driving to Naju from Incheon.
Oh, okay.
As you're driving through from Incheon to Naju, there's all these mountains.
Mountains.
Right?
Yeah.
And every once in a while you go through a tunnel.
Yeah, yeah,
right?
Yeah.
On the way from Incheon to Naju. Well, a tunnel is what a catalyst does.
A pipe?
Well, there's a barrier for a reaction to go. So if
Okay.
I want to convert A to B, there's some barrier that prevents this reaction from occurring spontaneously. What a catalyst does is drill a hole through that barrier.
Oh, okay. So it makes the reaction go easier.
Go easier.
Okay.
Under easier conditions, lower temperature, less energy, and sometimes even feasible. Like it would be unfeasible to do that without a catalyst.
Oh, okay.
So it's basically drills a hole through the reaction barrier, like a tunnel through the mountains on the way from Incheon to Naju.
And so here are a couple questions that are relative to the articles that you wrote. So a new catalytic approach uses metal ligand pi bonds. Could you explain what a metal ligand pi bond is and how it's different from the previous bonds?
Oh, wow, that's an old paper, actually. Traditionally, homogeneous catalysts based on metals have used the electrons in those metals. This has been the traditional approach. This is what I did in my PhD and in my postdoc. When I started at Berkeley, this is probably a 2003 paper or something. I guess.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that, we had the idea that this requires actually the metal to have lots of electrons because you're going to use the electrons in that metal.
Yeah.
And in often cases, because the metal has so electrons, we say it's reducing. As electrons are reducing, can be thought of reducing, which prevents us from being able to use that metal in the air because the air is oxidizing.
Yeah.
And so we had this idea that instead of using the electrons in the metal, we would make a metal ligand pi bond, which is a higher energy bond, and we would use the electrons in that bond to accomplish the same thing as the electrons in the metal.
Ah, okay.
And these metals would then be more oxidized, and we could be more environmentally and user-friendly because of this.
Oh, so you made it more accessible by giving it a ligand pi bond.
It provided a different pathway, so it's like making a new tunnel using this pi bond that was not previously, done. So yeah, conceptually, that was the idea. In the long run, it's still not as powerful as using the electrons in the metal.
Oh, okay.
But it was, it did make it more accessible, and it was a conceptually new idea. But in the long run, the traditional approach was sometimes still stronger.
Oh, okay. So I guess nowadays you're looking into more methods to use the electrons in the metal more efficiently.
Sure. Yeah, we've spent some time doing that as well. We moved from that project also in the early 2000s to a project involving gold as a catalyst. Gold has a lot of electrons actually.
Yeah.
So homogeneous, like catalysis with gold was really unknown, and we found a way to turn on gold as a catalyst.
Oh, okay.
In the homogeneous field, the homogeneous catalyst field.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
That was back in the early 2000s. So.
So I don't know if you remember this paper, but in 2015, you published a paper titled "Advances in Catalytic Enantioselective Fluorination."
Right.
Yeah, monoditrifluoromethylation and trifluoromethylthioylation reactions. That's a big mouthful.
Yeah.
So,
good job.
Thank you. Why is fluorine such a widely used material, and how is it more effective compared to other materials?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. So fluorine has a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword, right? So you may have heard of perfluorinated organics.
Yeah.
Forever chemicals, they call them sometimes.
Yeah, they don't decay, right?
They don't decay, yeah.
Okay.
So that's the negative part of fluorine. And certainly society and companies are trying to get rid of perfluorinated hydrocarbons as materials.
Yeah.
because they don't decay in the environment or in our bodies. On the other hand, that very fact that those carbon-fluorine bonds don't decay is very useful if you're trying to make a medicine.
Yeah, I'm guessing so.
Right. So fluorine has excellent properties for making pharmaceutical drugs because it's a strong bond. It wants electrons, fluorine, so it can tune the molecule with its so-called electronegativity.
Okay.
So it's a large percentage of new drugs discovered have a fluorine atom in it.
Oh,
this is very different than the perfluorinated organics that you would find as detrimental to the environment. It's usually a 1 or 2 fluorines in the molecule, not a whole fluorinated molecule. So while society is going away from perfluorinated organics as materials, fluorine remains very, very important for making drugs. A lot of the pharmaceuticals that are discovered now. And so what we worked on is putting in the fluorine with precise control into these molecules.
Okay, so I guess the more finely the more you can tune the individual fluorine molecules, the better results you get.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'd want to put the fluorine in a certain place to get the properties that you want as a drug, and that's what we worked on.
You're saying that trifluoromethylation affects the properties of compounds in. So you're saying that trifluoromethylation can finally tune what properties you want when you mix it with others?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can put a trifluoromethyl group or just a fluoro group into a molecule, and you can tune the properties, including things like metabolic stability and things like this, by putting that fluorine in.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Thank you. And moving on, here are some practical applications and impacts of your research. As we stated before on PFAAs, they're receiving a lot of attention and restrictions,
Right.
Specifically because they don't decay. As an expert in organic chemistry, what are some effective methods that you found out for eliminating or reducing the amounts of PFAAs in the environment?
Oh man, I don't have a good answer to that question. I mean, we haven't studied that, and I think it's a big societal problem.
Okay.
I think a lot of people have looked at that problem. I think what you can do as an organic chemist, if you're sort of saying what can organic chemists do to change that, to impact that problem. PFAOs and PFOs or whatever, there's different acronyms, are used because they have certain properties. That's why we use them. If we didn't have the desired properties, we wouldn't use them.
Yeah.
And so as an organic chemist, we know how to design molecules. So PFAAs or PFAOs or whatever, perfluorinated organics, is by inventing new molecules that have those properties but don't have the perfluoro groups.
Okay. So alternatives.
Yeah, alternatives that lack the detrimental elements.
Okay.
Yeah, and we know what we're looking for now, right? We know the properties,
Yeah.
so you just have to match a molecule with those properties.
Okay. So I'm guessing organic chemists have their work cut out.
I think that's right. It's going to be tough, but I think it'll happen.
All right. Thank you. I like optimistic views.
Yeah. No, I'm confident someone will discover a molecule or a class of molecules that will mimic the properties of those molecules without having the detrimental environmental impacts.
Okay. Well, to all the organic chemists out there, you heard him. You got your work cut out.
Yeah.
We talked about a small range of your research topics. Do you have any research areas or areas that you want to emphasize, talk about in depth?
We do so much stuff, but it's all sort of anchored in sort of understanding molecules in physical organic chemistry, like doing the types of experiments that lead to understanding. That's often takes a lot of effort to get there, but once you learn those skills, you can attack a lot of problems, right? So we have a program in designing molecules that specifically react with certain places in proteins. We have molecules like I talked about today that we can put into a battery. We have new catalysts like you described, and it all just comes back to sort of deep understanding of organic chemistry, not just simply thinking about, oh, how can I get a paper, but more thinking about, what can I teach the community by deeply understanding what I'm working on. So I think it's hard for me to pick one area, but amongst the ones, the chemical biology, the energy, the organic methods that we developed, fluorinations that we developed. Last week I was in Shanghai talking about fluorinations.
Oh, okay.
Today I was in here talking about batteries. It's hard for me to pick one, but I do think that what I'm most proud of for me and my group is that that we have a deep understanding in organic chemistry, and we use all the tools. We use like data science and machine learning. We use whatever we can to deeply understand organic chemistry, how it works, and the properties of the molecules that are made by it.
Okay, so I guess that in order to further advance as an organic chemist nowadays, you have to kind of broaden your study areas in more than one ways.
Well, it's an interesting philosophical question, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Whether it's better to dig deep into a problem or broaden like as you described, is I think a deeply personal choice, right? Like you can make the choice, right?
Yeah.
You can be successful being very focused. Actually, you can be very, very successful being very focused, and you could be successful being broad. You should just make that choice on what interests you most as a scientist.
Thanks for your perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, so here are some inspirational and future-focused questions. So you have a lot of research achievements as a scientist. What do you think are the most significant challenges and difficulties going on in the future as a researcher?
Wow. Not scientific or just in general?
Either one works.
Yeah. It's a tough question because I immediately sort of gravitate to a problem that I think every scientist throughout the world faces, which is finding the resources, let's call it, whether they're space or money or whatever it is, to delve deeply into a problem, to work hard at a problem and to do it. So I think that's a big challenge going forward, and society has to decide how much they want to invest in science and in scientists. Science in general faces the climate change problem. That's probably the biggest problem that all science face, and there's so many aspects of that problem that there's so many you could enumerate that's such a big scientific challenge.
Yeah, there's not one solution.
There's not one solution. To maintain an equitable world population that's that's large, without impacting the planet, is a big scientific challenge. And then if you overlay that on having the resources to do the pure science that ultimately would lead to the practical solutions, I think this is a big challenge on science. Right? This combination of having such a big problem and it being so urgent in some ways, but also needing the resources to do fundamental stuff that often lead to the breakthroughs. Is a tough balancing act that I think science is going to face in the future and is facing now.
Yeah. And so along similar lines, you mentioned how balancing the basic resources and solving these problems are a big problem. This leads to a lot of stress or other problems.
Sure.
Do you have any personal methods for managing such stress, or ways to blow off some steam?
Oh man, that's a good question. For me, the bottom line and why I'm a professor, not working you could work to solve these problems in industry and maybe even have a bigger impact in industry. is the interaction with my students, right? So if I get too focused on the problems, I just remember that, one of the reasons I'm doing this is to train people and to see my students grow into scientists and stuff like this. And this usually like grounds me in a way that is okay, right? So I just focus on, I recalibrate what I find important, and then that usually helps, right? So these are the things that are important to me, and then I forget about, or I don't forget, but I put less emphasis on those things that are causing me stress by focusing on how I'm still training people, and people are still working in my lab and learning about science and learning about chemistry. This usually helps me relieve the stress. But then the usual things like friends and family.
Yeah. So I guess it feels quite nice when one of your students becomes another professor or succeeds in his or her own life.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it's right. It's like it makes it feel worthwhile, right? It's gratifying to see them become professors, but even if you just meet them and they say like, oh, I have a nice job, I have a family, I'm very happy. Like just seeing the happiness and success of the people that came through your lab is, really puts it into perspective of why you're doing it.
Yeah, that sounds nice. That sounds really nice. And finally, as a professor and a researcher, I'd like to hear your advice for the KEN-Tech students here and everywhere. Like, what kind of mindset they should have in order to, achieve success and progress on through their lives.
Again, that's a really tough question. I mean, I could say that certainly my mindset was, I really liked chemistry, and so I still do. I really like chemistry. So, going to grad school and working hard, which is necessary to be successful, right? Hard work is always necessary to be successful. Always felt like a privilege to me that I got to, do research and have the taxpayers pay for me to do research, and so I think, the bottom line is, you find something you have some passion for, and then really put in the effort, right? Just really work hard once you find that passion, so you can, achieve what you need to achieve, right? To hopefully find something that you're happy doing. It's probably the most important thing. But finding something that you're passionate about, and then really making an effort for it. Just really working at, doing the best you can is the best advice I can give someone, especially when you're young, right? I think this is an opportunity that you have to like really define yourself, right? You really should find something you're passionate about and then work really hard at it.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Sure.
I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Danny.